Hello, welcome to the Whiskey Lodgecast. I am your host, DemiTastes, and these are my co-hosts, Spooky Chicken and Duckphill Platypus. And we have something of an agenda today. But first of all, let us open with what we are drinking tonight. Ian, what are you having?
A lot of water, as it were. Drinking a lot of water today.
And Phill?
Uh, I finished my drink and checked the can, so I don't have anything at the moment.
Well, I also am having plenty of water. It's been a hot day, and I've been out of the house most of the day, various errands, so I have really been needing it. And I may excuse myself for a bio break in about half an hour, I imagine.
Absolutely understandable. So
Good
moving
evening,
on,
Genji.
as
Yeah.
opposed to what you all are drinking, what are y'all drinking?
Yes. So earlier today in the Whiskey Lodge, we had people asking for sort of newbie recommendations, and one of the things that sort of came out as the leader today was Four Roses Small Batch, which reminded me.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't touched this bottle in a bit. This is a Four Roses Small Batch Select at 52% alcohol, which
Ooh.
I mean, this was sold at Costco. I don't know how select the select is. I'm not sure what the process is there, but in any case, this is a tasty whiskey. And also, I was rearranging my kitchen cabinets, and I found this glass, a pair of glasses actually, a gift from a friend. I haven't used these in a while. These are called dragon glasses, I think, or something to that effect. So there's this little you guys are going to have to look at the stream if you want to see what I'm showing, but there's this little etched logo of the dragon on the bottom of the
Yes.
glass, and this does not sit level, but it does sit on any one of these faces. And so if you put a standard
That's quite
size drink
fun.
in here, right, it's it'll sort of roll around if you want it to, but it's just kind of a fun thing to play with while you're sipping with friends. So anyway, this was not invisible, but near the back of my cabinet, and I decided that I want to use these glasses more often because they are quite fun. So that's what I'm going to be drinking out of today. Go ahead, Phill.
I've poured myself some J.H. Bards Spirit Co. Rye whiskey, which is a Virginia whiskey, and from a really new company. They're only 3 years old at this point. The company, I mean.
That sounds very fun.
And very apropos of the topic. Ian, what are you having for drinks today?
I have not been doing much whiskey lately. Actually, last podcast, the whiskey took a real toll on my stomach, so I haven't had too much this week. Right now, I am drinking a homemade concoction of sherry, a little bit of rum, and a bunch of strawberries and rose petals that I've also added in some Bruto Americano with. So a bit of a weird cocktail, I suppose.
Is that a kind of Amaro or vermouth?
Bruto Americano is made by St. George Distilling. It is essentially a Campari-esque spirit. Interestingly enough, these guys still use cochineals, the very small bugs that I believe live on the outsides of cacti and things like that, as their coloring agents. Campari used to do that some years ago, but they stopped. They outlawed a certain brand of the color, I believe, over in Europe because of issues with carcinogens, I want to say. So, yeah.
Good evening, Genji.
Yeah, good evening, Genji. Thank you for being a loyal follower of the podcast. It's always nice to have a familiar face in chat. And I'm not sure if you saw the short, but we got your little informational blurb into a little short video that we published on YouTube earlier today about informing us the actual correct facts about Professor Oak and Gary Oak. The person, the character, not the wood. We know all about the wood, but apparently we know nothing about the character.
Apparently not.
And still laughing about it. Oh, I should have been on this view for our little intro because we're just talking instead of showing the slides. I need to remember to. I have to do the host and producer thing at the same time. Applications open, I guess. Like, I don't know how we would do that because streaming from my computer seems to be like the easiest thing to do. But
We just have the producer sitting underneath the desk with a keyboard and a mouse, I suppose.
By the way, the
that gets risky pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Seems like that'd be tricky to pull off. Uh, by the way, the job pays in goodwill and vibes. Because we're all doing this for free because we love it. Again, not sponsored anything. We just talk about what we want to talk about because we love it and we want to support all this stuff. And also,
It-
honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, we love hearing ourselves talk. I think that's a part of it too.
if you want to
The biggest
sponsor it,
element
though,
for
I
me.
am a sellout.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely willing to take sponsorships. And I'll say just preemptively, I think we all agree. We actually didn't manage to have our post-production meeting or a pre-production meeting that we planned on having this week. But I think we could all agree that we're not going to take sponsorships from brands that we wouldn't talk about regardless. Like we're only going to sponsor. We're only going to talk up brands we personally like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is generally a thing that I've never particularly been interested in doing. I mean, especially when it comes to whiskey brands and things like that. People who are on the internet, people kind of know what we like and dislike anymore, and doing a turnaround on that wouldn't be invisible, I should say. People would know. I would wager.
Yeah, I think if you like, for example, if we took a sponsorship of I don't know brand A, and everyone who knows us already knows that we always talk about brand A, um, you know, it's not like we sold out, even though
Yeah.
kind of right. But again, not sponsored, not yet. We'd like to be. So reach out. I can confirm that we have collectively hundreds of Twitter and Instagram followers, and we have hundreds of people in the Whiskey Lodge who look to us, and at least a few dozen confirmed purchases from our recommendations. And that's just me saying to brands, that's why we're worth your time. As far as the YouTube channel goes, we're just getting started, so don't take the subscriber count too literally. And by the way, for anyone watching, yeah, we have a YouTube if you didn't know. And I guess I could bring that up here. Yep. So we have a YouTube that we're showing there, and last week here's this little short that I mentioned that we have this video about who or what is Gary Oak. I probably may have said who and what, or what and who, or what and whom. Let's not get into the grammar too much. What is Gary Oak after all? And we definitely were outside of our depth talking about the who. But that led for some fun content. So it's always nice to release a bit basically as a short because, being entertaining is the game here. Bringing you knowledge while being entertaining. Go ahead.
I will say I do enjoy The Who as a band, but yeah, I don't really know a lot about them.
I don't know about The Whom, so I'm not sure that's a band, The Whom, with an M.
Oh, I thought
The
you said
Whom is
Who.
definitely a band somewhere.
It's got to be a parody band, right? Everybody does
Yeah.
a parody once in a while. Yeah, cool. So I kind of had in the vein of what's happening this week, and also in the vein of continuing to rep the hashtag drink responsibly, I have a slide here that I got prepared. This comes up now and again in the Whiskey Lodge about like how much should you drink, right? We talk about dry week and everything. It's like, you guys don't drink very much, do you? Well, I guess in absolute terms, no, we don't. And that's kind of the point, right? The goal for us, at least I can speak for myself, is to enjoy the flavors, not to, as they say, get from point A to point B, right? We're not trying to reach a destination of a certain BAC or anything like that, right? If we end up feeling buzzed, it's because we've enjoyed a lot of good stuff with friends and we've had a good time. But generally, the game is drinking responsibly, and that usually means staying well within control. And so I wanted to talk about, maybe rehash for some people who've seen this before, the sort of guidelines that they talk about when I don't know, did you guys have DARE, the drug awareness and resistance education, or something along those lines?
Yes,
I vaguely remember DARE.
Coming on 20 years ago.
Yes, it's a long time ago.
Like I saw DARE for the first time.
I think there was a puppet show in my elementary school, but that's all I remember.
So I think we also got this spiel in the first freshman year orientation in college because they just want to get ahead of people discovering alcohol. You got to know what a standard drink is. In the United States, and this is not true everywhere, I think in Europe and Australia, a standard drink tends to be more like 1 ounce or 30 milliliters or 25 milliliters or something like that of distilled spirits. But in the US, and all of the health information you'll find is going to talk about standard drinks. In the US, a standard drink is defined as, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't actually do my research on this, I did this off the top of my head. 12 ounces at 5% ABV beer is one drink. Or flip those numbers around, 5 ounces of 12% ABV wine, or 1.5 ounces of 40% ABV whiskey or spirits. And then there was something in there about malt liquor, and I don't actually know if anybody drinks that. And I think barley wine is probably the closest thing. But like, really, we're just getting into multiply the size of your drink by the percent alcohol, and you end up with a number of servings, more or less. And so I say, if that 12 times 5 is 60, and that 1.5 times 40 is 60. So let's call 60 points one drink. So this becomes more interesting when you're actually at risk of over-consuming. And one such thing, which I happen to be going to tomorrow, is a whiskey tasting event. So a dozen friends and I get together and we share our latest acquisitions or things that are tasty or interesting, or we do a theme like bring a whiskey that has a finish and bring the thing it was finished in, right? So if you've got like a Balvenie Caribbean cask and a Caribbean rum, for example, right, as a pairing, or some such thing, some theme like that, and then and so that's, if everybody brings those 2 bottles, that's 24 bottles on the table. If you want to taste everything, you're going to be drinking 24 things. If you drank full servings, you'd be in a lot of trouble. So you gotta kind of know where your servings are in your Glencairn. How full is an ounce and a half, or an ounce, or a half ounce, or a quarter ounce is kind of my preference. For me, honestly, to enjoy the taste of something, when I'm just like, what is this? I've never had it before. Let's give it a shot. And I don't mean an ounce and a half shot. I mean, give it a try. I'll pour, like, I'll just tip the bottle, and the smallest amount that falls into my glass that is at least 1 sip, that's my serving, right? We're talking real light pours, because when you've got a marathon to run, you got to be really conscientious of how much you're drinking. 2-3 sips is plenty for me to get an idea of whether I like something or not. And after I've sort of gone around the table, I might come back and have a half ounce of something and close out the night. That's kind of the pattern. Most recently, I think a Lafroig 30-year independent bottling is the thing that I spent my final ounce of the evening on. That was real nice. I ended up taking a bottle of that home. One person in the group did a group buy, and we all ended up going home with a bottle. Basically, pretty much the size of how that went. It was fun. Trading bottles and samples with friends. That's like a really fun way of doing the hobby, especially when you've got to, say, go down to California to buy them. So somebody will do that for the whole group, and then it's somebody else's turn, and so on. So anyway, one of the things I'll do is if somebody pours me, first of all, I try to avoid anybody pouring me anything, and that's not because I'm worried about them putting adulterants in my drink. That's because if somebody else is pouring whiskey for me, I'm not controlling my intake before it's in my glass. And I have a real hard time throwing out good spirits, right? So I'm going to finish it. If I'm not careful, if I will go on autopilot and finish it, I have to force myself to pour out what's left in my glass, or to use a spit bucket or something like that. I just try not to put that much in my glass in the first place. So if somebody serves me a half ounce of a cask strength 50% ABV, that's a half a drink, right? It doesn't need to be 3/4 of an ounce, which would be a half of a shot, but that's for 40% whiskey, right? If we're at 50%, if we're at 60%, and I'm getting a half ounce, that's already more than half a drink. I want to be under that. I want to be a quarter ounce. I want to be a few sips, right? Half of a quarter ounce. I mean, I could say an eighth of an ounce, but like at that point, you're really just like trying to get the smallest amount you can in the glass, and it's hard to really say how much that is at that point. So that's sort of the spiel on like how you responsibly drink when there's a lot to choose from. Also, like, you got to choose, right? If everybody at the party brings 4 bottles, not a chance I'm getting to anything. 1, there's not enough time. We're usually like a 3-hour thing, and then we go home so the host can like clean up and go to sleep. And 2, you're just not going to be able to do that and kind of feel comfortable the next day. Also, don't drink and drive, right? Like this is plan ahead. Get an Uber, sleep on the couch, whatever, right? No matter how much you're drinking, you can't guarantee you're going to stay under that 0.08 BAC, right? For me, I'm 200 something pounds. So what I know about myself is, roughly speaking, my BAC is under the legal limit if I've had 4 drinks plus 1 per hour. But I also get sick really easily. I usually get sick around that amount. So I want to stay well under that. That's me personally. And some people might find it funny, like, hey, here's this person who drinks whiskey for a hobby that is essentially a lightweight. Yes, absolutely. I'm totally a lightweight. Don't ask any of our fun distiller friends about that, because they totally wouldn't know.
I'm actually going to use this as a jumping off point to a slightly different thing while I text Duckphill here. But so there is another small problem actually with drinking quite a lot. I'm actually going to use this to transition into something of a story which I actually want to cover in quite a lot more detail later on at some point during the podcast. And sorry, Phill just says that he might have been a little bit out of sync right there, but we'll hopefully figure that one out. But as a sort of thing, there was, I want to say this was back in the 80s, there's an absolutely excellent New Yorker article by, let's see, Patrick Radden Keefe, called The Jefferson Bottles. It was about the potential forgeries of some of the Jefferson, like Thomas Jefferson's bottles back when they were allegedly found somewhere in Paris back in the 80s by a man. Well, and a lot of these things get a little bit weird, but allegedly by a man named Hardy Rodenstock, who is now passed back in 2018. Harvey Rodenstock was a wine collector and sort of salesman of these very, very old, very, very rare wines, who is at some point suspected quite heavily of adulterating those wines and completely falsifying some of them in certain cases. I do not know whether he was convicted of those claims or not. One of the things that he would primarily do is he would
looks like we might have lost Ian.
start popping open. Ooh, did we lose me?
Well,
Ooh,
you're back now.
Lose me.
Go back a sentence or two and give us that.
No, yeah, totally. So what Rodenstock would do is he would invite a lot of people, usually famous people, rich people, people he knew, people in the wine industry, and start, hey, Andy, how you doing? Cat has decided to start playing with the chords. And he would pour them a lot of wine, a lot of very, very fancy wine in many cases. And then at the end of the night, he would start pulling out wine that was allegedly incredibly old and incredibly rare, things like 1945 Lafitte Rothschild and things like that from over in Bordeaux. Very incredibly rare bottle of wine, that one. But the thing about it is that a lot of people in the industry and things were like, always said, yeah, we think he's legit. We think he makes some really, really cool winery, sells some really cool wine, but we were also so absolutely blasted by the end of the night that we do not remember what those old bottles tasted like. So if nothing else, drink your liquor responsibly so that you know what the good stuff does indeed taste like by the end of the whole process.
Yeah, thank you much for making that point that I meant to make and totally forgot about. As far as whiskey tasting goes, there's kind of another bit of strategy there where you want to start with the lower intensity stuff, the stuff that's lower ABV, that has less finishing stuff to it, that has less peat, because like sherry fatigue is a thing, and cask strength fatigue is a thing, and peat fatigue, palate fatigue is a thing. And if you're drinking Octomore, that's going to kill your whole palate all at once. So if you've got an Octomore on the table, I recommend saving that for last, because they've got the wine and the high ABV and the peat smoke all in one. And the highest peat smoke you're going to get in a whiskey, right? Like, peaty things don't taste peaty after you've had an Octomore. That's kind of, and it's not exclusive to Octomore. Ardbeg is also in that really peaty vein, and to some extent Lafroig and maybe a few other Islas. Yeah, you want to, there's a whole strategy to like, if at some point, right, the time to stop drinking is when you've stopped appreciating the particulars of what you're drinking anymore, right? Like at some point, that's why you sort of like, you have to kind of know when your palate's going to be dead and just commit to a half ounce of something to close out the night, and then like sit down and chat with people and stop perusing the bottles at some point. And like I'll be honest, right? Like in the, it's so tempting when it's your first or second or third time doing one of these things to just hit every single bottle on the table, because like, well, what if I miss out, right? And all you've got to show for it is potentially a picture of the bottle with your glass next to it, and you may not remember the details of that whiskey anymore if you've gone too far on burning your palate before you get to that point, right? Like the picture's fun. Can I say, can I give a rating to such a whiskey? No. Even on a 5-point scale, maybe, right? I could say good, great, excellent, perhaps. Um, but like at some point, you're just kind of going, hey, this is good whiskey. Hey, this is good whiskey, right? That's the extent of your impression. Not like, am I gonna buy this later? I don't know. I don't remember what it tastes like. Or if you're really
I've
nerdy and you want to be antisocial, bring a notepad and just write down everything. But you know, at the end of the day, these are social events, and you want to prioritize what you're there for, which is being social, not.
I've done a couple of sort of spirits expos. The Virginia Spirits Expos. I did one at Belmont Farms, and then this past weekend I went to the one down in Charlottesville, which ended up being a little bit of a circus, but that's not actually related to the event. Um, and the first one that I went to, I had a goal of trying as many things as I could, and I am a hearty person who, through misadventures of youth, have developed a uh, tolerance for the consumption of alcohol. Um, I know for sure that I had about 40 samples in the span of 5 or 6 hours. And I will tell you, I felt pretty good until we sat down to eat. And then I uh, suddenly didn't feel very well. And that is one of the risks that you face is if, especially if you are moving around, it won't occur to you how much you have consumed or how much it is going to or is already affecting you until you sit down or you change your state of being if you're seated when you stand up. And so, lesson learned. Our plan for the next one was to spend more time at the event, take more frequent breaks, drink more water, eat more food. And then I ended up sitting on an Amtrak train for 7 hours.
Ooh,
That is
oh
a
no.
that is a long drive to be uncomfortable. Even if
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if you're, I mean, not drive, right? That's a long trip to be sitting still and being uncomfortable.
Oh, I mean, that was before I got to the event. So
Oh.
Okay.
we only had, I think, about 2 hours there before I had
Mhm.
to head home.
Yeah, the
Yep.
actually little bit of behind the scenes thing. Last week when we were doing the podcast, I had just gotten back from about uh however many days of straight traveling I was doing. Oh, over a week at that point, I want to say, of just trains and planes and such every single day. And so I sat down. It'd been the first time I'd had whiskey in a while, and we were drinking with Joe, and it was a great time. And then the podcast ended, and I started getting motion sick because my body was not used to being inebriated in that way. It was really quite uncomfortable.
That is the other risk. When you're talking to someone and having a good time, you can sometimes not realize how much you are consuming. Like,
Yep.
just
Yeah.
flat out, oh yeah, um, I poured, I think, samples of most of my bottles of McCarthy's, which I don't have behind me anymore, and got done and realized that I had consumed probably 5 or 6 ounces of whiskey and
Yep.
didn't even think about it. Didn't it never occurred to me
I
Yeah.
did actually
because
want to. Oh, go on.
because I was having fun talking to Joe and learning, and that's just you get into the groove and talking about this, I want to try it, that sort of thing, and it gets out of hand pretty quick.
I did actually want to
Mhm.
ask as well before we move on to our next little topic right here. You were talking about taste, sort of, kind of running out on barrel strengths and things like that. And I did actually want to ask, how much water do you all put in your tastes and things? Because I find that like drinking as you're getting closer up to the 60%, I have a much rougher time with it. It's almost like drinking hot coffee and burning your tongue or something like that. Like, how do you all kind of counteract that?
Funny you mentioned the hot coffee
Controversially,
thing. Yeah, go ahead, Phil. Yeah.
controversially, I don't. Um, I I don't regularly add water to the whiskey that I'm tasting, and that is something that I keep going. Oh, I should have a little dropper in a glass of water while I'm doing tasting notes, and then I don't remember, and so I just go without.
Yep. I am guilty of forgetting that today. I would say I'm about halfway between you should do it and I also often forget. If I'm gonna review something, I'll always have a glass of water with a straw. I don't have like a dropper, and I haven't felt the need to buy one. Um, Not that they're hard to find, right? I just have something that serves the purpose. So I'll get a glass of water and a metal straw. You know, reuse things and the metal straw because reuse things and don't harm the environment, right? Like I'm not going to burn a plastic straw and using it for a dropper for drinks. So glass of water, metal straw, and then you do the thing where you like close the top of the straw to like lift up some of the water, and like that ends up
Mhm.
giving me like 2 or 3 drops of water that goes into my drink. That'll do most of the time. About halfway through a review, I try to start a review without water in the drink. I will add some water and see if it changes. And if I still think that it's hot, I will probably add a little more water. The thing you were saying about the sip of coffee thing though, that's like that's there's some good pieces of advice that people give people who are sipping spirits for the first time. Um which is like usually first of all, approach it like it's very hot and take a sip like you would take of a very hot cup of coffee, right? Like if the coffee is going to burn your tongue in a certain quantity, the whiskey is going to burn your tongue in a certain quantity. And I think speaking for myself, I don't think that I've necessarily dulled the senses of my mouth to spirits. I think to some extent I've gotten used to it, but also I have developed the technique for taking a small enough sip that it doesn't burn. And if it does still burn at that point, I need to add water. Um, and that's fine, right? Like you should add water until the burn goes. Some people say add water until the burn goes away, right? Without killing the flavor. And try to thread that needle. There are some whiskeys that don't swim well, as we say. They don't take water particularly well. They will burn up until the point they taste like nothing, and that's a damn shame. And that's I think for a lot of people who don't have the fact that they've dulled their senses to the burn, right? Dulled the nerves in your mouth and tongue to the burn. Um, just may not ever really be able to enjoy a whiskey like that, right? And so that's a subjective thing, right? I may rate a whiskey like that poorly if I feel I must add water because it burns too much for me to enjoy it, and by the time I can comfortably enjoy it, it doesn't taste like that much to me anymore. That I may give a slightly worse review than something which, um, for whatever reason, has better integrated ethanol, right? Which is the phrase I use to mean, right? Smooth is a word that people bandy about that doesn't mean a whole lot by itself. Not that I'm not going to call people out on it. I know some people will. They're like, don't say smooth. Smooth doesn't mean anything. We don't like that snobbery here, right? Smooth is an insufficiently precise word. That doesn't make it a bad word. I can most of the time, if I'm drinking the same thing that somebody who's not used to describing whiskey is drinking, and they say it's smooth, I probably know what they mean because I'm having that same experience, right? Sometimes smooth means it doesn't burn. Sometimes smooth means the flavors are really consistent throughout the drink. I think most people who are like appreciating a particularly good um, or what they're told is a particularly good whiskey, probably think of smooth, right? Like it doesn't just not burn. it also has a consistent profile throughout the drink, right? I think that's what most people are going for. They want their drink to have an identity, right? Whereas I kind of go the other way. I actually think that's kind of an sometimes that's nice, especially if it's complex and the complexity follows all the way through. If it's simple and that's just a consistent flavor, I'm less interested in simplicity in that sense. But I'm also more likely to rate something highly if it has a complex nose and a complex palate and a moderately complex finish. Finishes are usually not super complex, but sometimes they can be wild. And I'm okay if all three of those things are different, because that is a drink that sends me on an adventure.
Speaking of finishes, sometimes being sort of one note or not adding complexity, a great example of that, in my personal opinion, in terms of like comparison, is like the Angel's Envy compared to the Isaac Bowman. The Isaac Bowman, of course, being a product of Virginia, um, that does a much better job, in my personal opinion, of integrating the flavors of bourbon and sherry together, or port, sorry, port together.
Let me just clarify. You are talking about, maybe you're talking about both. You are talking about finishing casks, which is
Yes.
taking a whiskey and putting it into a piece of wood, a barrel that held something else before. I'm
Yes.
talking about
Where you
the part of the flavor experience profile where
ah,
first you smell it and you get what it smells like, and then you taste it and we call that the palate, which is like both a textural and a flavor thing combined with the senses your nose is giving you. And then there's, after you've swallowed, there's sort of this long tail of the experience of the lingering vapors and so on in your mouth that we call the finish.
right. Now I was
That's what
thinking
I
of the
was
construction of the whiskey.
right. So I was talking about the experiential finish. You're talking about the construction, which are both confusingly um they're using the same word. I don't know if we have another word. I guess for a finishing cask is an industry standard term. Sometimes we say secondary aging, but
Mhm.
that's awkward enough and not super industry standard, so we'll just say, finishing cask or whatever. But yes, I 100% agree with you, Phill. The Isaac A. Bowman. Is there an Isaac Bowman that's not an Isaac A. Bowman? I think it's just Isaac A. Bowman,
Uh,
right?
it's just Isaac Bowman.
Oh, what was the A? Never mind. Okay, so
There's
Isaac.
there's another Bowman that in that company that I think makes a rum as well, but I'm not sure.
There's like different finishes and stuff. But the Isaac Bowman, the Bowman Brothers is the company. The Isaac Bowman is the port finished release. I think that is a dramatically better port finish than Angel's Envy. Is that a cancelable
N-
take? Maybe.
Maybe. Well, it's also important to note that the Angel's Envy isn't a bad whiskey. It's just it's not what we're looking for in terms of complexity and the added component of the finishing cask.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it is clear that the port finish has had an effect on the Angel's Envy bourbon. That effect, however, for me, reads as a sugary sweetness and not so much the fruity, like grapes and cherries and dark, figs and dates, that sort of thing. I guess those are sort
Yeah.
of sherry flavors, but like certainly the red fruits, the cherries, the cranberries, that sort of the grapes, that's what I get from port. That's what I want to get from a port finished bourbon as well.
The A. Smith Bowman is their cask strength bourbon.
Okay, so there's an A somewhere in that lineup. I wasn't completely
Hmm.
Yeah.
hallucinating. Yeah, cool. Just to take it back to that note on food, about going to whiskey events and having food. Food is mandatory. Make no buts about it. The
And
crazy
more
thing
than just
about,
crackers.
yeah, more than crackers. We like fresh baked bread. The host
I
or a
love
guest,
potatoes.
potatoes. Okay, I have not done
Oh, any
potatoes with
any
whiskey.
potato dishes.
Okay, I've not done potatoes with whiskey,
Fries,
but I get it.
latkes, potato galette, things like that. Huge fan of those things.
Yeah, but anything. So first of all, mainly starchy and hearty. You want to fill up your stomach with something that is going to absorb liquid, just slow down your body's uptake of alcohol, which is both to help your ABV, though do be cautious, it will continue longer. but also to prevent you from getting sick, which is what happens when you're basically you get sick when your blood alcohol concentration goes up too fast, as well as just being too high. But like, you know, that sort of sudden, like that vertigo feeling, that sort of sudden, like, I'm feeling woozy now, and your body's like, oh, if this is happening fast, it's going to keep happening fast, and something's wrong. Time to expel. Right?
Last stop, everyone off.
Yep. So yeah, definitely food is mandatory, and food before you ever realize that you need food. And also, to protect your palate and your stomach, drink plenty of water. With something like beer, people say like, hey, if you're having beers, drink like a whole pint glass. If you had a pint of beer, drink a whole pint glass of water before your next beer, right? Great advice. Now, see this table once again. Right? That 12 ounces beer, that's not a pint, right? Here's the thing to realize. You go to a tap house and you order a pint of beer, and you're usually getting maybe a specialty beer that is a higher ABV. This is the thing to realize. And the reason that I say like, hey, I had a glass of beer, that's not one drink, right? I had a 16 ounce glass of beer that was 8% alcohol or something like that. Right? Now get out your phone and do the math, but like that ends up being 2 drinks, more or less. Yeah. And like you can kind of just do the rough math there. You don't need to get really nitty gritty on it, right? Like I feel good about rounding up most of the time. So like, you know, if you're having 2 ounces of whiskey, you might want to have 16 ounces of water, 20 ounces of water, right? Like drink a whole water bottle for that amount. For what I do is if I'm pouring that 1/4 ounce taste of whiskey, in between whiskey, I need to wash my glass because I'm not going to use 24 glasses. I'm using the same glass all night. Maybe go to like a second glass if there was something particularly pungent or sticky that doesn't want to leave that glass. Switch to a new glass. Sometimes you want to do a side by side, 2 Octomores on the table, something like that. For any glass that you finish, fill it all the way to the top with water and drink it. That's how you rinse your glass, and that's how you stay hydrated. This is drinking tips brought to you by #DrinkResponsibly.
Yes. An extremely
There'll always
important
be more
part of this
drinking
hobby.
tips. Incredibly so, Phill. Yeah.
All right, I think we've probably beaten this horse to death. Why don't we move on to the Virginia Whiskey Tournament? And if you don't mind, Phill, I'd like to kind of give my take on this and do a little intro here.
Of course.
So the Virginia Whiskey Tournament, which we've talked about a couple of times on this podcast already, and on the YouTube, there's a 10-minute video or something like that that was basically our last discussion, particularly about the Virginia Whiskey Tournament. That has kicked off around 4 or 5, 6 days ago. I don't recall exactly. There are 3 days. Monday morning, 3 days ago. There are 3 days and change left in the polls for the first batch and the second batch. There are more in round 1, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we are in round 1, but we are doing the first couple of batches of round 1 simultaneously, not to overwhelm the internet. What this Virginia Whiskey Tournament is not a judging competition, right? We are not critically judging these. We will, for sure, critically judge these whiskeys personally, right? And you too, if you can get access, you should feel free to decide exactly how much you enjoy the whiskeys from these companies. Keeping in mind there are 30-something entrants in the...
44 this year.
44.
Ooh.
Impressive. And very much looking forward to that. That's a lot of whiskey. That's a lot of whiskey even for somebody who has a sizable collection to begin with. That would be a quarter of my collection just there on Virginia whiskey. I'm not going to go out and buy those bottles, but what I could recommend is if you've got a handful of friends, 6 people or so, and you live in Virginia and you can, or somewhere else that has access to all of these brands, you know, you could go ahead and as a group, this is still going to be expensive. You could go ahead and as a group buy one of everything and share them. And that would be a fun thing to do. Me personally, my local group is more into Scotch, so it's not likely that we're going to get people on board with majority bourbon to experience all of these things. So I'm going to do the best I can, which is probably going to be on a handful of these only. And that's okay. There's a couple of ways. So let me get back on track because I have a tendency. I didn't script this, so I'm gonna ramble. Um, Virginia Whiskey Tournament is not a critical judging competition. This is a community-led bracket. This is essentially, for lack of a better term, let's say a popularity contest. This is about the supporters of the brands coming out and saying, I like this more than these other ones at every step of the bracket. And that means that everyone should vote. And I will say the semifinals and the finals last year had hundreds, maybe 1,000 plus votes, if I recall correctly. And it was a lot of fun seeing once you get that kind of hype drummed up, it's a lot of fun to see people like trying to recruit more votes and battle it out and be like, my pick for the best whiskey is better than your pick for the best whiskey, right? Like this ends up being a huge community thing. It's the distilleries communities, it's the whiskey Twitter and the Instagram and the YouTube. It's all these communities coming out of the woodwork and saying, from those choices, this is my favorite, and going on to the next round. There are several ways you can make this choice. If you are able to taste all of these whiskeys, you could pick the one that is most to your tastes. If you are able to research these whiskeys, anybody can do that. Anybody can research these brands and decide if you like what they're doing. And to that end, we have decided that we ought to help you. Because doing all that whiskey is quite an undertaking, and we are a group of people who likes to research whiskey. So, with no further ado, Phill, lead us through it.
All right. So the way this is being run this year is I've got 4 distilleries in each batch, and the batches for round 1. Round 2 is going to be, I believe, 1-on-1. I need to check my bracket again. But there are a lot of distilleries, and a lot of them don't have a lot of reach. For example, River Hill Distillery, which is the first one on our list today, founded in Luray, Virginia in March of 2014, sourcing grain from their own farm and nearby farms across Page County. And one of only a handful of legal distilleries in the area, which is really cool. They have extremely limited distribution. I believe at the moment you can only get their whiskey at their distillery and at their nearest ABC store, which means that, that's an incredibly small sample size. But last year they made it through round 1, which is really cool. And they seem like really nice people. I unfortunately have not been able to make it out to Luray to buy a bottle, but that is on my list to make sure I do before the end of this year. And of course, if you have any questions,
That's not where the caverns are, right?
it is.
Weird
They
question.
are.
Very cool caverns out in the Luray Caverns are really cool.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And they are 100% locally sourced grain in their whiskey, which is a big deal, and it's sort of a through thread of Virginia distilling, is because Virginia has such a high percentage of farmland to other land usage. We have the ability to source so much locally, and I think that has an effect on the whiskey, and of course, how much they're tied into the community. Next slide, please.
Before we move on, is there anything that you think we ought to comment on besides this the general presentation?
I'm not sure. I haven't had anything from them, unfortunately, but I know a few people who have. I have a friend who passed through. They also they board horses and they raise cattle for beef, which is also very cool.
I'll have to see
Right.
if my dad is being out that way. He lives right near that way.
Ah,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that adds a little bit more color for me, right? They are I feel like it was easy for me to sort of gloss over. They're sourcing grain from their own farm, and when they need to, getting it from other local places as well. and their own
But within
farm.
the county, which is crazy.
Right, yeah. And I don't know how big that county is. Counties can be quite large.
Page County's a pretty good size. It's mostly farmland. There's Luray. It's, I believe, in the valley, so there's not a whole lot of industrial stuff out there. So it's primarily farmland.
Yep. So let me add a little bit more color to why the local sourcing may be particularly interesting to certain people. So first of all, the closer you are between the production of the grain and the production of the whiskey, the less transportation costs and impact on the environment you have to worry about. So being a locally sourced brand has an environmental positive to it, which is important to me. And I personally am willing to pay a little bit more for that, knowing that it is actually more expensive because it's riskier to source your grain from locally, right? When you can't treat your grain as a commodity that you can get from anywhere, you have concerns about yield and availability, and keeping the lights on gets that much harder. And so raising the prices ever so slightly to support local business and to decrease carbon emissions is a big deal. And also, maybe we shouldn't gloss over so much the fact that this is the last bullet point there, the bastion of legal distilling in an area with a long history of moonshining. Does
Yes.
this distillery officially or unofficially have a history of moonshining? Which should just be a fun fact.
They do not mention illicit distilling on their website, apart from the fact that there is a very long and storied local history of moonshining. One can assume that they would be aware of such happenings, given that, you know, moonshining is a community-driven industry. But they do not make any mention of illicit distilling other than the fact that there's a history of it in Page County.
I guess it would be risky to admit to that in Virginia.
Yes.
Ooh.
All right, let's move on now with all that said.
R.D. Wilhelm Distillery, which is better known as Reverend Spirits.
Hold that up a
They're
little
kind of
longer
cool.
so I can get that on screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice, simple little logo they've got there with the bullhorns.
Oh, yeah.
Good looking bottle, yeah.
So, fun fact, those aren't horns at all. That is a clerical collar.
Oh.
So, the brand is named after the head distiller's father, Dr. William Wilhelm, in this case being a nod to his Austrian heritage, Eugene Dornemann. And, you know, it's sort of a call back to their roots and sort of a look and a respectful nod to where they come from. And they make some interesting stuff. The first 30 barrels were contract distilled to another distillery while they were working out paperwork and permitting with the federal government and the Commonwealth of Virginia. They do have some fantastic label work. Like, I think that the consistency between bottle shape and label design, and the fact that it is a really simple read, is a really good design in general. The only downside is they have information on a clear sticker on the back with dark writing, and I can't read that at all.
I can't even see that it's there.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a
but-
note for the distillery, perhaps.
Yeah.
I want to say I think it is a really cool duality that. So I interpreted bullhorns because I was in the farm mindset.
Yes.
But your note there says it's a clerical collar, not devil's horns. I
I
really
thought it was
like.
devil horns.
Okay, there you go. So I really like that duality, right? Like, this is like, you know, a reverend was involved here, but it is firewater, right? And there's a certain pair of angels on the shoulders kind of element to this that is captured in that logo, which is that's a real nice logo. Like, I think a lot of people, think that you shouldn't buy a whiskey based on bottle design. I've always been of the mindset that like do your research, but it's a perfectly legitimate reason to buy a whiskey
Oh yeah.
because you like how the bottle looks or you like how the label looks. Oh,
A
let's
good
back up for a
portion.
second. The pawn mentioned in the previous thing with everything locally sourced, terroir, right? The one word terroir.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Like to the extent that terroir exists in whiskey, and we can get into that later. If you're gonna find it, it's gonna be in an all local kind of distillery. Absolutely.
I agree. Um, I do obviously because I just held it up. Have a bottle of their bourbon, and it is very good stuff. I think it could stand a little bit higher proof, but they're really getting their foot in the door, trying to get out there. They aren't a very old company, and so they've got to market to as many people as possible, and so they can't come out of the door swinging with a really make you think whiskey. Um, and they do a fantastic job of balancing that with putting something in this bottle that is, really something that pulls you in and gives you a reason to spend more time with it. And I think that it is very good stuff. It's 40% alcohol by volume. It is not age statement. Um, but again, they're not a terribly old distillery. They're a relatively recent addition to Virginia. Um, they're out in Norfolk, by the way, um, which is an interesting place for a distillery, I think.
Where my grandma's from.
I keep forgetting that you're from out here.
Yeah,
So far, we haven't had a single episode of this podcast that has featured someone from Kentucky, which in American whiskey, of course, is a very significant location for bourbon, at least these days. Although,
Yes.
as Phill likes to remind everyone, that sort of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia area is really arguably the birthplace of American whiskey as we know it.
Have you ever seen an old map of Virginia? We used to own Kentucky.
Yep. And
That is
Tennessee,
true.
good chunk of
Everything
Pennsylvania.
everything out to Ohio, really.
If you go back far enough, the maps are just a really great vector line into nothingness. So, like, if you're drawing the lines really generously, we own a good chunk of Russia.
We no, we almost fought a war with Pennsylvania back in the day over the whiskey producing bit of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And we're gonna do a whole right. This is Phil's episode, but we're gonna get to Ian doing his whole spiel on the history
Yes.
of whiskey
Oh
in that
man,
area, the
And
whiskey
I'm
rebellion, and so
looking
on.
forward to it because
Yeah.
that's going to be a lot of fun.
As we
I'm
run out
ready
of the
to do
low
so.
hanging fruit topics, we're definitely gonna get into these more specialty topics, and I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Um, and any other questions about the Reverend Bourbon?
you said you have it. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did my brain just gloss over you saying how it tastes?
Oh, it is a really interesting, fairly grain forward bourbon. So it's got lots of the sort of corn sweetness that sort of like it's hard to describe, but I know it and I know that other whiskey drinkers know it that corn sweetness with just a touch of rice spice and some like dark cocoa-y chocolatey notes from wheat, and all of that is layered nicely on top of a fairly gentle bed of that tannic spice and slight char that make it a very friendly, approachable whiskey.
I love that. Did you read that, or was that off the top of your head?
And that is just off the top of my head.
Excellent. That's a real good off the top of your head review. So I'm
Oh,
gonna
thank you.
ask you, like, I don't want you to give a rating number or anything like that because I don't want to sway the results of the voting. But let me just ask you, thumbs up or thumbs down, or if you like, are you happy with the
Thumbs up.
purchase of that bottle?
I'm absolutely happy with the purchase of this bottle. It's one of those when you're buying this sort of thing, you are paying a little bit more because if you don't, they won't do anything because they won't survive. And you know, you if you want distilleries to do like cool, wild, experimental things, they need to survive long enough to do that. And I think that that is an important element of this is supporting those distilleries so they can fulfill their dream of creating interesting and unique whiskeys that are their own style.
Absolutely. I do have a question. I remembered. Uh, First of all, when you showed me that bottle, my first impression is that looks like a gin label, and then I actually see on your slide
Yes.
it appears they have vodka and gin as well, and I think those are really nice
Yes.
labels.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about the consistency of their label across the spirits. They color code the bottom of the label on the like little sort of bottom of the pennant thing. So the bourbon is red. Um, the I believe it's the gin is blue and the vodka is purple, or I may have that backwards. Um,
Let me zoom in. Yes, the vodka's blue and the gin is purple. Can't quite see that on the stream, I think.
but
Oh,
it
actually,
is.
I can do something about that. No, I
Ooh.
can't because it's gonna hide our. I didn't put our audio sources on that view, so never mind.
Ah,
I do have a zoom in view of the slideshow, but I didn't think about. I've never used it before, so I didn't think about it. Doesn't have our audio sources on there, so we'll skip that. All right,
I
moving
have
on.
not met these guys, but I would love to because they seem like genuinely very interesting people. They're also heavily into the restaurateur industry in the area and have run a number of bars and restaurants in Norfolk and the surrounding area.
Yeah. On that note, go meet your local distillers.
Oh yeah,
They're often more than happy to talk to interested people, and they are, as a whole, really nice people that really care about what
yes,
they make. Right? Nobody gets in. Let's face it. Nobody gets into distilling because it is the most lucrative career. And especially in craft distilling, right? You've got to constantly thread the needle of pricing things that you can keep the lights on while also keeping the prices low enough that people will actually buy them. So it is sadly kind of a low margin business for the actual producer. So by and large, distillers are people who love what they do, and those are the great people to talk to. All right, next up,
I
Three
can't.
Crosses.
Ooh,
Three Crosses.
Aha, another bottle that you have.
Yes,
That's a great
I
label.
don't have all of.
such a good
Oh yeah,
label.
my favorite part of it is actually the little medallion because that's actually a piece of embossed metal that is glued to the bottle.
Ooh,
And that is the coat of arms of the founder's family, which I believe is Davenport.
I love that
But
tie-in.
they're the first legal distillery in Powhatan, Virginia since Prohibition. There were apparently at least two pre-Prohibition, but I couldn't really find good solid sources on that. They only operate two very small stills. The They have one 150-gallon still and one 200-gallon still, and they're producing enough to get distribution all the way from Powhatan, Virginia, to where I am up near DC. Um, and I've met I've met the guys who make this at the Spirits Expo at Belmont Farm. And they're very cool. I got to try their Dark Horse Rye, which is phenomenal. And I'd love to get a bottle of that, but it isn't available locally. Um, this is their American whiskey, which is a bourbon mash aged in used barrels. It is a really nice, again, very approachable, you know, definitely aiming for a crowd pleaser, and I think really hitting the mark. It's, gentle, easygoing on the nose, a little bit sweet, some like soft spice, and just a hint of tannic notes, and lots of caramel. and vanilla, which I think comes from the used barrels.
I was gonna say that sounds like a used barrel. And I would love to soapbox here. American whiskey fans will American whiskey fans hate this one trick. Um, um, yeah, it turns out that most legal categories of whiskey that have a specific name in the United States require new oak, which is getting harder to get and more expensive. It also turns out most of the rest of the world really likes using refill casks, stuff that has been used before. And actually, there's a whole industry of buying used bourbon barrels because you can only make bourbon in a barrel one time. And so that is quite a useful commodity for the rest of the world industry. I will say, for bourbon lovers, especially if you are getting into bourbon and you find bourbon too tannic, um, the next best or next better thing, depending on your perspective, is going to be an American whiskey made from a bourbon mash and aged in a used barrel. Exactly like this. It's going to cut down that tannic element and it's going to give you everything else that you like from a bourbon. It's honestly a sadly underrated, maybe overlooked category. And this is what you're going to get. This sort of thing is what you're going to get from craft producers. Is a little less expensive to produce because you're not using new oak. And that is a boon to them. And it also lets them be a little more creative with the flavor profile, which we love to see.
Someone tell Skip that Denny said skip bourbon.
Yeah, Pawn, if you wouldn't mind conveying that message, we would really appreciate it.
And just tell
Yeah.
him to watch the stream. Homie needs to watch the stream.
I mean, these guys make a lot of really good stuff. Pretty much everything that I've had from them, I remember fondly. The regular rye and the dark rye are fantastic. The uh, TTB refers to it as a fanciful name, which is the sort of slightly more colorful branded name for a spirit. Their rye is called Noble Hound Rye, which I like because I like dogs. And the Noble Hound Dark Rye is, I believe, finished in port barrels or port style barrels, and it is very good. Um, and it's a very dark pumpernickel rye, and I think that that is fantastic. I really enjoy that. It's different from other ryes in the region, which like I believe it was Raymond said recently in the lodge that sort of regionality of style is fading, and it's opening the door for distilleries to do their own thing to a higher extent, and I think that's very cool.
Absolutely. And just a meta point. That comment that you just made, replying to a comment that followed on from a stream we did a couple of weeks ago where we mentioned the new Springbank distillery and we were talking about, is there a regional style really, like how much our new distillery is going to exhibit a regional style given the world of immediate information that we live in, where you can choose whatever it is that you want to do, and the regional impact is no longer information bound. It's climate
Yeah.
maybe, but not like what information you strictly have access to. So yeah, like we're bringing those comments from the lodge onto the stream and bringing them back to the lodge and bringing them back to the stream. So I guess this is well and truly a part of the lodge now, what we're doing here. I want to back up for a second. I'm doing a bad job
Yes.
about reading chat today. The pawn mentioned, I believe it was about the previous, the Reverend Spirits labels. Yeah, love the label and would love to get one in rye. And I think we all share that sentiment that we'd love to see this in rye. Phill, do you happen to
Also,
know?
like the color green.
I
Oh yes,
I
yeah,
don't
they need a
believe.
green flag for sure, and they will because as we've discussed
Yes.
previously, absolutely every rye in the world, not literally, but vast majority of ryes use green as an accent color because, well, that's what you do.
Yeah, the pawn has
Yeah.
clarified that he actually does want the 3 cross in the
Oh, the
rye.
3 cross in a rye. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. Right there in the background, you can see that Noble Hound Dark Rye.
And it is fantastic stuff. If you can get your hands on it, I recommend it. I I really like it. I'm also a terrible shill for Virginia Distilling because it's where I'm from. It's where my heart is.
And by that you mean the concept of distilling in Virginia, not necessarily Virginia Distilling Company, yes?
Yes, yes,
But also, we'll get there.
yeah.
Hello, kitty.
He's here now.
Yes.
He's
Have
very
to
Spooky, I
have
think
happy.
to
your
have to.
video might be desynced with your audio if you want to rejoin the call
Ooh,
real quick.
interesting. We'll fix that.
All right.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah,
while
by the way,
he's
another meta
fixing that,
point about production. We're thinking of we're going to try Zoom soon because
yeah.
Discord has been more problematic than we thought. We wanted to prioritize audio. Discord seems to do a good job of that, but once you throw video in the mix, it gets weird. It seems to do a real, like, it wants to send you all the audio and it wants to send you all the video, and it doesn't care about whether the timing is good or whether it matches up, and that's just not good for a live stream like what we're doing. So we're gonna try something else.
Yep.
Stay tuned. We're always working to improve production. Let us know if you have any points on production improvements, and we're also trying to start climbing that mountain of doing proper video edits as well. And with that little interlude out of the way, let's move on to our next distillery. Tarnished
I,
Truth.
Tarnished Truth, another one that I have.
Awesome. 3 in a row.
These guys are out of Virginia Beach. They're interesting because they're the only American distilling company or distillery that is situated in a hotel. They are in the Cavalier Hotel overlooking the Atlantic, which
I
is
used to go to the
very cool.
hotel right next to that for breakfast all the time.
It's genuinely an extremely cool looking facility. It looks like because they basically where their still is, which is a big 500. I mean, it's not really big, but for craft distilling, it is pretty big. 500-gallon hybrid pot still with a 20-foot vodka column, where the hotel laundry used to be, and it's a really beautiful looking facility. All their equipment was manufactured by Vendome, which is sort of one of the premier still builders in the U.S. Um, the this is not a fantastic example of what they're doing currently because this is a sourced MGPI product, um, and they have moved on to bottling their own distilled product at this point, or so I am told. Uh, and they have a very higher end, very nice looking Old Cavalier bourbon, which I have not personally tried, but I have on pretty good. It's fantastic. It's, I believe, 10 years old, and it is a product of Virginia. Um, these guys know how to do labeling and marketing, and that is something that they are extremely good at. And they also hosted a pretty big Virginia bourbon thing last year or the year before, and are frequently seen, holding a hand out to welcome and help out newer and smaller distillers in the Commonwealth, and that is fantastic. That is sort of one of the best things about craft distilling is how much you know help one distiller is happy to give to another.
Yeah, I'm looking at their
Um,
website right here. If you ever are in the area, I highly suggest going back by there because this place looks cool as hell.
Yeah,
it is very cool.
I do think that operating a distillery out of a hotel is like that's first of all, that's got to be expensive. Like that can't be cheap. The real estate, right? Like a hotel is going to do well by
Hmm.
being on good real estate, and using a whole bunch of your square footage to run a distillery is no small thing. And that a 500-gallon still is no small still either. That's, and not to mention the aging and so on. Do they age on site?
I believe they have an off-site aging facility, but it is a place that they own. They aren't doing something weird like sending their barrels somewhere else to age. It's sort of like a couple of facilities or a couple of distillers share an aging facility out. I can't think of where exactly it is, but it's basically a couple of the smaller distillers rack their barrels in the same facility to save on space, and they all, uh, you know, work together fairly well and are friendly with each other. So that's a method that works for them.
All right. Well, that definitely feels like a place to visit. Now,
Yes.
once again, I'll ask the question. I you may have done tasting notes, and again, I'm thinking about multiple things, so I may have just glossed over it again. If you did, feel free not to repeat. But I will ask you, thumbs up, thumbs down. How do you feel about that bottle purchase?
This one I feel less good about because it really is just the MGPI high rye, and it is expensive for the MGPI high rye at 3 years old.
Hmm.
But their own spirit, I've had samples of it, and for the price, I would definitely recommend picking up a bottle of it. The Old Cavalier is expensive. They have a bottle and bond bourbon that is fantastic. It is uh, a little bit more tannic. It is less of that definite MGPI sort of flavor profile, but it is a similar style in that it is a higher rye bourbon, and I recommend trying it if you can.
Do me a favor and hold up that bottle one more time, because I'm not sure if it's super clear from the
Yes.
picture. That is an extra rectangular bottle with a nice big foot on it.
Oh,
Um,
this is just a square footprint.
yeah. So
It is.
it's a little unusual, but actually it's great on a shelf because they pack in real nice. And I think we
Huh.
lost you. Oh
Oh, I think we lost him.
no!
Yeah, once again, not sponsored, but I did pop onto their website. It looks like their Discretion straight bourbon whiskey is $5 off all June. If you live in Virginia. Oh no, I hope we do. We can get Phill
Yeah.
back.
So this actually is going to be, this is our fourth bottle. So this is one of the
100%.
Oh, he's back.
He's back. He's back.
We
Okay.
lost you for about 30 seconds there.
Yeah, we lost you for a bit.
I think I fixed it.
Okay. So we were talking about the footprint.
Right. So I mentioned briefly that a good portion of the cost of that bottle is the packaging. That beautiful label, that beautiful bottle, and that is an expense that craft distillers have to face that is lesser for big guys. And that is one of the reasons why craft whiskey costs a little bit more comparatively. Because this stands out. This is something that you see on the shelf and you go, oh, that's cool. And that helps sell their whiskey. And that's important.
Yep. Completely agree. There's a rum from Hawaii called Kohana that comes in a cube, like literally a cube shaped bottle, which is real cool looking on the shelf. It's also really good rum. It's basically just a cube with the neck just like comes straight out of it at right angles. Pretty much the same as this, but like even more cubey. Now that cube shape unfortunately doesn't sit so well on a shelf because it is wider and shorter than everything else I have.
That's quite fun, actually.
So as I was saying, I'm not sure if you heard it, Phill, and I think we may have lost your video again.
Oh no.
I am
think that the next one is one that I don't have.
okay. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna quit the call and rejoin. Maybe that'll help.
Oh,
Hang on a sec.
okay.
He's gone. Oh no, he's never mind.
Well, I mean that was intentional.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
It would
going to
have been really
suggest
funny.
a coup of the podcast, but I mean, you came back too quickly.
Well, yeah, you can't actually, I'm streaming the Discord call from my computer, so like there is no podcast if I'm not in the call. All right, so
I was going
that's
to say it would have been really funny if Ian and I swapped.
Oh, it would be, yeah. But I think what we figured out last week is that Discord sorts the names alphabetically, which is actually really good for making sure everybody's face is in the same place every time we join the call. Okay,
Yes.
so as I was saying, I think when you were out of earshot, I think I'm gonna go back to the bracket slide just so that like you can give a recap of this particular bracket, and I'm gonna take a break. I'll be right back. So
Okay.
1 second. So here's your bracket slide. So I'll just read that off.
Yes.
Make sure that we got the right ones. So the first bracket, batch A of round 1, River Hill Distillery, Reverend Spirits, Three Crosses Distillery, and Tarnished Truth.
Yes. And
Now that's a
I'll
really
briefly do an
hard.
overview of that while you.
That's a really hard list to choose from.
Yeah. I mean, all of these brackets are really difficult for me because, like, I haven't had anything from River Hill, but their story is so cool that I can't help but feel like I owe them, like, some, like, extra support. Reverend Spirits makes a fantastic product. They've got a great story and beautiful labels. Three Crosses, they're really cool people. They make really good whiskey. I mean, really good whiskey is a common thread throughout Virginia distilling. Um, I I might be biased, but I think that there is a higher percentage of good whiskey being produced for the number of distilleries we have in the Commonwealth than pretty much anywhere else in the States.
You're preaching to the choir, my guy. Like I feel the exact same way. Cancelable uh opinions, maybe. Not quite sure yet. Here we go.
Uh-oh.
All right, so the pawn. You just said that you bought the Blackfoot River that looks like the Stanley thermos for the bottle. Is that? I can't help but think that I saw something very similar in Idaho at some point. That wouldn't happen to be out of there, would it?
I believe it's out of Montana. I could be
Oh,
wrong. I'm thinking about where Blackfoot River would be, and I know that I've seen a Montana bourbon. I was right. Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking
I
of
think there
cool
was a
packaging,
huckleberry vodka also, sir, also sold in a thermos back in Idaho somewhere, but don't quote me on that.
I'm back, by the way, in case you guys haven't seen me.
Welcome back.
Hopefully you
hello.
weren't making fun of me too bad while I was gone. Actually, still had the headphones on.
No,
So
we were just saying how Virginia makes the best whiskey, bar none.
all right.
Yes.
So since we were talking about American whiskey that is not aged in a new oak barrel, aside from American single malt, which I harp on constantly, it occurred to me I actually own a corn whiskey, and a corn whiskey is one of the more recognized
Ooh.
but also uncommon categories that is not just allowed but required to not be aged in a new oak cask. Mellow Corn that Phill has there is, of course, one of the most famous meme level whiskeys, which is not
Yes.
because it's bad, but because that label is gaudy, let's say.
Yeah.
So
Hasn't
what I
changed
have
since
here
1953.
hasn't changed since 1953, and so that's a Heaven Hill, correct?
Yes.
And it's a bottled in bond, and that is something like $15. That is a real good value in a 100 proof whiskey. Great for cocktails, as I understand. I haven't had it, but as I understand it, vanilla, corn, caramel, all that sort of nice sweet stuff that you'd like. I see Ian has an Abasolo.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's what I want to try.
I have heard of it, but I don't remember any details.
There is an Abasolo hanging out in the Stanton ABC store if you want to pop down there.
Hmm.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, I figured since I went to pull this out anyway, I actually keep this on my bar cart, but have not opened it yet, which is funny to me. Um, so I while I was out of the room, I figured I'd grab this. I'm gonna open it now because I think the only corn whiskey I've had besides tasting this at the distillery um, has been a Balcones, which is because it's aged in Texas in a relative, like their style is very aggressive. Even the used casks impart quite a lot of flavor. And that Texas whiskey is kind of just its own thing. This also is a Texas whiskey, but it is aged a shorter period of time and has a lower ABV. This is the MKT Distillery in Katy, Texas, Old Town. Used to be a bunch. Actually, the distillery itself is inside of what used to be an old rice mill, um, which is pretty neat. I don't think they have any rice spirits there, but that's also where I happen to have bought that aquavit I made that cocktail with. That's a different distillery, but they're partnered together, so they sell each other's products, as I understand it. Um, so
That's cool.
MKT refers to the railroad name that the town of Katy was named after.
Missouri, Kansas, Texas.
Yep.
My great-grandfather worked for them.
So yeah, Texas corn whiskey, and even though Balcones fits that same description, these are quite different. And as long as we're doing this little interlude here, I might as well give tasting notes on this one.
Yeah,
But I do
I poured myself a
recall.
little bit of the Abasolo, not an American, a Mexican, so right across the border from there. But
Oh, there you go. That's why I didn't remember it being an American whiskey. I was like, I
yeah,
vaguely remember that
it's
being
just the only corn
tequila.
whiskey I have.
Yeah, do they make tequila there too?
I believe they. I don't believe the distillery itself makes tequila, but that's a complicated question because they're owned by some other people.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, definitely. It's a little new makey on the nose, to be honest, especially compared to the bourbon that I was drinking before. That sort of sweet and like a little bit vegetal cooked corn. Yeah, remarkably, there is a tasting note in here that reminds me of eating a sweet corn on the cob, which is pretty nice. And beyond that, you get it's a little headsy. I think this will get better as it opens up in the glass. I think it's a little new makey for 29 months in the barrel. I'm actually a little surprised. I wonder if they're using climate controlled aging, which would if you do that in Texas, that's gonna obviously take you out of the so-called Texas climate that makes things age really quickly. So this is going to be more like what you'd expect from elsewhere. When I had this at the distillery, I actually felt like this was one of the best things that I had there, including next to the aquavit. Uh, so either different batch or just needs some time to open up, I think, because this is not particularly striking me as the same way it did then. Anyway, anybody else pour something new, or Phil's gonna keep going with whatever it is that we're talking about if he has it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having the Abasolo, but that's not a super new one. I think a lot of people know kind of about that. We'll probably get into that at some point when we do some less common whiskeys and things like that one of these days. But get a lot of really fun sweet corn and chocolate off of the nose on this one, and a lot of kind of tortilla on the palate, but that's for kind of interesting reasons. But we'll probably get back to Phil's topic right here.
Yes. I believe the next one up is Trial and Error Distilling, uh, which was founded in Richmond, Virginia in 2017. And they are interesting. They don't specialize in a single spirit. There are a lot of distilleries that will go, we're going to focus on whiskey, sometimes even specifically rye whiskey or wheat whiskey, or we are going to focus on rum, or agave spirits. Trial and Error does a little bit of everything, and they sometimes do some really weird things, but they do them all really well. Um, they've got, I mean, everybody on their team has lots of experience both in distilling and in the restaurant and food retail industry, and they sort of bring all of that together to make a lot of really interesting gins and rums and cordials. And I think the way they phrased it was you could fill an entire bar cart with everything you would need from trial and error distilling because that was their goal. And I think that that's probably fairly true. Sort of one of the most interesting things that they make that is currently on their website is a hopped whiskey, which might otherwise or better be known as a distilled beer. Um, I did not get an opportunity to try that last time I saw them at an event, but I did get to try their straight whiskey, which was interesting. Very soft and floral, which floral isn't a note that you frequently get in American whiskey, but it was a very soft floral, slightly spicy whiskey, and that was interesting.
I'm
Did you say
really
I
you
into
don't
this.
currently have.
did you say you do have this or you don't have this one?
I do not,
Okay.
unfortunately.
So by the way, from all their branding, from all the stuff they do, the fact they just do a lot of weird stuff, I love the name. That is such a good name for this kind of thing, trial and error.
Yep, they really do what they say on the tin. That's great. That is transparency.
Brahma, slow gin. Ooh, they do a smoky gin over there. Didn't know that. That's very fun.
And they're really interesting to speak with at events. I did not get to actually talk to them this past weekend, um, but the last time that I went to a Spirits Expo, I got to talk to them some, and they're really interesting people.
All right, taking a
I'll
step
have to
back.
keep them in mind. Yeah.
We have been real bad about reading chat today, which is good for staying focused.
Oh yes.
But I'd like to acknowledge the comments that go by. So the pawn says, I think this was a while ago. He said he bought the Blackfoot River that looks like the Stanley thermos for the bottle.
We actually had a conversation with him about that while you were gone.
Oh, okay.
He posted that up in the Whiskey Lodge. It looks super cool, actually.
Dare I bring that up?
Sure, talk about it.
Navigating Discord live on stream is risky. Let me
Oh yeah.
let me just go to the let's see. Don't I
For
have
the
a
other
version of
stuff, the
this that doesn't
pawn.
have Discord? Doesn't
I
have.
saw that you said that the Absoluto was a huge cinnamon bomb, and I absolutely get that.
Hmm.
I really want to know what barrels they use because it's definitely not new oak. But I'd be really interested to see what they are that they actually age the Absoluto in. It's super interesting.
I know what I can do. I have a slideshow.
Yeah, you do.
So let's just drop that in
Oh,
there.
I was about to.
Oops. Yeah, there you go. It does. It really does look like a thermos. That's funny.
It's super cool. That's a
There you go.
great bottle.
All right. And the other comments that we had was love Abasolo and Balcones Baby Blue is good. I completely agree about Balcones. It's just that it's different from what you might expect from corn whiskey if you've had essentially any other corn whiskey. But it is quite good. And I have a single barrel of the I believe it's Baby Blue. I get confused about the corn whiskey products that Balcones has. Obviously, Brimstone is the smoked one. Not too hard to get that straight. Um, but then they have the Baby Blue, and they have the True Blue, and they have the Blue Corn Bourbon.
What is the True Blue?
I am sadly not as much of an expert on non-American single malt Balcones, so I would defer to Phill on that one.
So I believe that the True Blue is a cask strength corn whiskey, but I'm not 100% sure of that. That is not one that I've ever actually seen in person.
You know, I'm just gonna go check the bottle.
Same.
Let's see. I'm trying to figure out what order I've got these in, so I know what I should pull up next. If if
Yeah. So
Morrow
I have
was in chat, I'd say we should ask him.
yeah, absolutely. He's been busy lately. We'll see him eventually. He might even be a co-host eventually. So what I have here is this
Yeah.
True Blue cask strength single barrel in used American oak, selected by Green's Farm Spirits Shop. If I recall correctly, I found this by sort of perusing a secret link to the store of all the stuff that they had for sale already, because normally I believe they are normally a wine shop, and if you go straight to their regular website, you just find the wine. There was something weird about how it was not easy to get to the spirits page. And anyway, I was like, ooh, I don't remember what I was ordering, but when I found this, I was like, that's going in the cart for sure. I would love to have a store pick of a Balcones. I've derailed the whole podcast again by talking about what I'm drinking. I apologize.
That
But
is totally fine. I think we should probably get back on track with Phil's and the Virginia distilling stuff right here, because we are getting to time right here pretty soon.
yeah, we got
Uh-oh.
roughly 20 minutes left if we say we keep it to 2 hours. All right, next up is the thermos bottle. Next up
I've
is
been doing real bad at keeping this under a minute each.
That's fine. That's because I'm interrupting you and adding color commentary. So we've got the Bards Spirit Company up next.
Yes. So this is actually really cool to me. They are about 3 years old as a company. They were founded out of a whiskey club, the Bourbon and Rye Drinkers Society. It was founded by two guys named Jason. And I've met one of them. I believe the one who spells Jason with a Y. And he's really cool. I have his business card somewhere. Um, but they're doing sort of the same locally sourced ingredients thing where they're sticking to Southwest Virginia. They do all their own distilling, all of their own aging. They've got a single malt, which they didn't have any bottles of on their table other than the one that was
We lost your audio, but not your video there, Phil.
an interesting rye funk that I think a lot of people
Whoa, hang on.
perceive as
I'm going to
spice.
reset my
Turn
call
Phil into
again.
a robot.
Yeah. So I rejoined the call. Phil, why don't you rejoin the call also? Because we're getting a big lag between your video and audio.
All right, stand by.
Just to double check, Spooky, it's not just me, right? Because it's possible that...
Oh no, I also got that. I was trying to
Okay.
figure out if it was just me.
Okay, because I'm running OBS and it's using half my CPU, so it's entirely possible I have issues you don't. But yeah. You are back. Go ahead and give me a sound
Excellent.
check. Yeah, cool. All right.
We're doing great now.
Great, yeah.
All
Please
right.
continue.
So, J.H. Bards Distilling, they're in southwestern Virginia. They are in Fairlawn, which I think is near Blacksburg. I'm not 100% sure of that. My geography for that part of the state is a little bit rough because
Ooh, that's fun.
it's sort of an interesting, primarily rural and mountainous area of the state. They are sourcing all of their grain from Southwest Virginia, which is really cool. Um, and I like their bottles and I like their label design. Their labels contain a lot of information, but they aren't like so dense that they're hard to understand. They've got batch number proof, the what the mash bill is, and I believe they have a way of decoding what is what on their website, but I'm not 100% sure. And I like, because I like interesting bottle shapes. I like that this is basically a boot flask, but big. Or a bib flask, like you would keep in the bib of your overalls.
I do enjoy that. Yeah.
Um, uh, I don't know when my audio went bad, but they were founded in 2020 out of the Bourbon and Rye Drinker Society, which is or I believe it's still around, is a whiskey club founded by the two guys that founded J.H. Bards, both of whom are named Jason. One of them spells their name with a Y. Um, and I've lost track of where I was going with them. I
And you said you'd met the one with a Y, and then you kind of cut out.
Okay. So I've met one of them. He's a really great dude, really nice. He gave me a free sticker when I bought the bottle of rye. Um, they are also making a single malt, which I didn't get to try because I was trying to reduce the amount of samples I was having at that point in the day. Um, but their rye is interesting. It's got that sort of, not really too aggressive, but some of that like pops out at you funk that I think a lot of people interpret as like uh a like the that rye spice at a potency that takes it from being that like sharp spice to just sort of a dense, round, potent flavor. Um, I really enjoy it. It is definitely very young, but that is inescapable at this point for as long as they've been operating. And as they have the opportunity to age their spirit, it will, lose some of the rough edges and really grow into the like little bits of like floral sweetness around the edges of their whiskey and build up more of the like tannic vanillins and caramel flavors.
Yeah, nice. So the fact that you didn't try the American single malt, of course, I have to razz you. That is my favorite thing,
Yeah,
and I want
yeah.
to know what you think. But I commend you for your responsible choice at an evening of lots of samples, as we talked about earlier today. You've got to protect your palate, and you've got to protect your comfort and health. Uh, so I want to put some context on this sources ingredients from Southwest Virginia. So that
Yes.
is local-ish, not quite as local as same county or same farm.
Yes, but that is a pretty good um I'd say when you're referring to the southwestern corner of Virginia or southwestern region of Virginia, you're talking about maybe, I mean, definitely less than a quarter of the state in terms of total area. So not a huge area.
Yeah, it's not it's still very much in the vein of local.
Yes.
Again, not sourcing that commodity grain from wherever it happens to come from. Um, having trouble there, Spooky?
No, I'm sorry. I was looking at
Okay.
the actual location of the J Bart Spear. I just realized I probably look really really weird on the camera.
Yeah, you were like
No, it was on
staring
Google Maps.
directly into the camera real close.
Sorry. No, I was looking at the actual location and sort of seeing what. So they might. I mean, given their location, because they're right at kind of the entrance of that little corridor heading out in the western bit of Virginia. I mean, they could probably source as far out as Lynchburg or something like that, but I'm not really sure quite what they mean by Southwest. Yeah.
In any case, my question is, given that they are only 3 years old, and how long ago did you get that bottle?
I got this last Saturday.
Oh, okay. So this is plausibly 3-year-old whiskey from their own production.
Yeah, I think that it is. I think that it is less than 3 years old. I think it's probably. Yeah, I think it's probably under 2 years because it is labeled as rye whiskey and not straight rye whiskey, and it doesn't have an age statement.
Yep, there you go. Okay. All right.
Um,
So given that you've only recently purchased that bottle, but you've tried it a few times, thumbs up or thumbs
yes,
down on whether you...
I like it. I'm a big fan of rye, so I will say that I will like a rye whiskey that others might not, but I think that this shows genuinely a lot of potential to be an exceptional rye whiskey.
Yeah,
Even
and do you know what the mash bill is by any chance
it
on
is
that one?
65% rye, uh, 18% malted rye, and 14% malted barley.
Okay, let's...
Or no, 18% wheat. Sorry, I misread that.
Oh, okay. Did you say... You didn't say malted rye, did you?
I did. I skipped a line because the formatting on the website is a little bit
Okay.
funky. And read malted barley as malted rye
Okay.
and totally skipped the wheat line.
Okay. I
Uh,
hope we can get into malted rye at some point,
yes.
because that's a cool thing. Not a lot of people are doing it. Apparently, it's hard to do. Um, I actually recently bought some bottles that incorporate some malted rye, so that'll be fun. I might pour myself that to cheers us out later. Um, in any case, the 65% rye mash bill is a far way from the predominantly most popular rye mash bill, which is MGP's 95.5, which there are
Yes.
better examples and there are not so better examples. Um, but in any case, the 95.5 rye mash bill does not jive with me necessarily. That specifically the MGP 95.5. If I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, the Balcones Texas rye is 100% rye.
It is.
Um, and I adore that whiskey. It is one of the most unique whiskeys that I have. It's not funky, and yet it is super unique because it is really chocolate dominant. And I have nothing else that really compares to it. But I will say that I think in terms of appealing to a relatively mass market, relatively broad market, the lower ryes tend to have more of that. I apologize. I feel like I don't know how to turn off the notification sounds that are coming in from my the Discord call that I'm streaming. So there's somebody's chatting me.
Oh, that may have been me sending you something on Discord.
Ah.
I Here you go. I'm gonna mute this server for an hour. There you go. Problem solved. Maybe not. Something else is beeping. How do I just turn off notifications? Oh well, stream can handle it. Um, just feels a little embarrassing to be getting notifications in the middle of a stream. Is this not? I thought streamer mode is on. Streamer mode is enabled. Well, there
I
you
haven't
go.
been hearing you myself, or your
Yeah.
So it's
notifications, that is.
it's yeah, it's the audio coming through because I'm streaming your audio from Discord.
Oh,
Oh,
I see.
So I realized what happened is instead of dismissing the banner for streamer mode, I turned off streamer mode, and that's why I'm getting the notification sounds. Problem solved, and lesson
Oh.
learned for next time. But we may not be using Discord for very much longer anyway. Um, so as I was saying, that 65% rye mash bill is more likely to appeal to the kinds of folks that like a high rye bourbon, but it's a little
yes.
more on the rye and a little bit less on the corn. So if you're firmly in the bourbon camp and you want to try a rye without going way into the deep end, and also you want to try a relatively less common rye, if you think you don't like rye and all you've had is the MGP 95.5 rye, you owe it to yourself to try rye again. And it's worth it to try something that's a low rye mash bill. One of the ones that I like, a couple of ones I like, Wild Turkey 101 rye is, I believe it's 51% rye, so it's as low as you can get. Um, and I also like the old Overholt Bonded, which is somewhere around that 65%, maybe
Hmm.
70% rye. Um, both very good for cocktails. But not to derail on styles and geekery too far. Um, any further comments on this, or should we move on to the next distillery?
I'm good to move on.
All right.
Same here.
Next
Next up, the Lost Whiskey Company.
Yes. So this one is interesting. Um, I on one hand I really like their very minimalist labeling. On the other hand, it causes issues because I meant to grab the weeded bourbon and I ended up with the high rye, and it does not say either of those anywhere on any of these labels.
What a
The way
strange
you
thing.
tell is the color of the antlers.
Wow, that's subtle.
And if you don't know which color is which, and you're in an ABC store with fluorescent lighting, all of the antlers just look black because they're a reflective
It's a foil
foil.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, just completely unrelated to that label, I love the caustics that were showing up on your camera there because of the light behind you
Oh,
going through the bottle and making that bright spot on the label from inside.
ah,
That's just a cool thing. That's me being nerdy
yeah.
about optics.
Um, these guys are interesting. They are an interesting whiskey as a luxury experience company. So they don't just do whiskey. They were established in 2016. They're actually really local to me. They've got a tasting room where I live that I was not aware of
Huh.
until today when I went looking. So I'm going to have to find them and visit their tasting room and actually talk to them because um, I'd like to learn more about them. Their website is very vague. It doesn't have a lot of actual concrete information about the whiskey that they produce. What I will say is the wording on the I am moderately sure that this is MGPI high rye.
So again, that
Um,
95.5 rye mash bill, probably.
no, the high rye bourbon
Oh, the
mash
high
bill from
rye
MGP,
bourbon.
which
Okay.
is 60 corn, 36 rye, 4% malted barley.
Interesting. Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to
and
hear more about that when you do go by and visit them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it isn't bad whiskey, but it is, you know, it is interesting that we have such a wide range of producers in Virginia. We have NDPs, we have people who are doing their own distilling, we have people who source initially until their house distillate is ready for bottling. Um, and we have distilleries that range from a, you know, farm operation, operating on a working farm, out in Luray to these guys who are entirely focused on a luxury experience connected to their whiskey. Um, and I really wish they were a little more transparent about what their product is and about themselves. But, you take what you can get.
All right. Any more questions about that from you, Demi? I think
Um,
I've.
yeah, I think I could take a step back and say, just in general principles, things I dislike about going to a liquor store. Um, leaving aside interactions with the staff, which often has you've seen the Nick Offerman in a hardware store and Parks and Recreation
Hmm.
vibes. I won't quote it because it'll make me sound rude, but I feel like that sometimes. If you know, you know. Um, then there's also, what the hell am I looking at for a solid 70% of what is in the aisle, right? Like the fact that you can't just pick up a bottle and look at the label and get an idea of the things that you value in a whiskey. What is the mash bill? I mean, they have to say the ABV, they have to say what type it qualifies as. Why can't I know the mash bill? Why can't I know what kind of casks it was aged? Obviously, most of them are new oak if it's bourbon stuff, but like for other stuff, like why aren't you being transparent about the kind of casks? Why aren't you being transparent about where you're sourcing your ingredients, right? Like, I don't want to have to go to a website to do the research on like there's a lot of people who don't do research about their whiskey. Perfectly fine. Before I got into doing the research about the whiskey, I would either buy Wild Turkey or Maker's Mark or something random that caught my eye. It's a perfectly valid way to go shopping. But if you're a consumer who wants to know more about what you're buying, you shouldn't have to sit there on your phone in the liquor store doing the research about the bottle that's in front of you, repeat ad nauseum, because you're trying to find some particular type of thing. Or do the research, decide what you want, and at that point you might as well buy online. What's the point of the liquor store? If you can buy online. You can't do that in all places.
Yeah.
Or worse, you talk to the store employee who is incentivized to sell you certain things and is going to talk up those certain things at the exclusion of what you're really after. Now, when you've got a label like this, that as you had this experience, you were trying even to buy a specific thing from this company and you still failed at that task through no fault of your own. I have a hard time excusing a brand for that.
And the harder thing is we kind of see why they've done this, or at least I think I can kind of get why a person would do this. I mean, it's for if you have multiple of these bottles up on your collection and things like that, and someone comes by, it's really cool to be able to say, oh yeah, these two are different things. You can tell by the color on the little antlers right here. I just wish there was a bit more information that would help someone to actually buy the things themselves. Yeah.
I mean, and it isn't even on the back either. Like, you've got a very small label on the back.
Yep, let me
So,
I'll make your camera real big. Hold that up just a little higher because I've got your video cropped a little bit. Yeah, so that's a whole bunch of fine text. Is that the usual surgeon's warning and the website?
That's the surgeon's warning.
And
the sturgeon's warning is a very different thing, Demi.
Sorry, did I say sturgeon? So the normal like drink responsibly and like the sort of basically the absolute minimum they're allowed to put on the label is what that looks like. It's all in fine print.
Their website, it looks like.
Yeah. Does it say anything of substance on the back label?
Bottled by Green Spur Inc. in Fairfax, Virginia.
Hey, there you go.
That is it.
Well,
that is a tough one.
The bottling is a requirement of the labeling, I believe. The distillation state is also a requirement that is sometimes skirted.
It is skirted in this instance.
I see. The implication being it's produced in Virginia, but the actual confirmation of fact, maybe not so much.
And I have no way of telling, but it certainly tastes like that MGPI high rye bourbon. And
it is a non-distilling. Yeah, it is a non-distilling producer. So chances are good, just by random chance, you're most likely going to find an MGP sourced whiskey in a non-distilling producer.
But like I said, I'm going to have to go visit the tasting room now that I know that it exists and actually talk to somebody because I'm curious.
Yeah. I'd be interested what they will tell you.
Yes.
Because they can tell you in some cases.
Yeah, if they know, if they even know what they will tell you, what they're allowed to tell you. Sometimes those tasting rooms are really just like, you're a bar that only sells our products.
Yeah.
And good luck, right? Like that happens. But there are a lot of tasting rooms that are very much knowledgeable people. For instance, when I visited Westland, the tasting room, is right next to the distillery. So like distillers popped in too. But like the tasting room staff was incredibly knowledgeable about what they had behind the bar. and how it was produced and all that sort of stuff. So like there are the extremes when it comes to the tasting rooms and so on. Does Virginia allow I guess the prices are set by the ABC. Do they allow tasting rooms to sell the bottles?
Yes. Um, well, yes and no. Uh, this is complicated by the fact that like Becky Harris and the folks at Catoctin Creek and a handful of other distilleries banded together, I believe, sometime in the like 2012 to 2014 range to basically make their case to the Virginia General Assembly to via ABC to allow them to sell their own spirits in tasting rooms and be able to have a tasting room. And it's sort of changed and evolved a little bit over time. I know that some distilleries definitely can do tastings and sell bottles in gift shops. And I also know that some will sell you bottles but won't do tastings, and some that will do tastings and not sell you bottles. And I think it's all down to the sort of liquor license that they have. And often tasting rooms seem to have different liquor licenses than a distillery itself.
So really all over the board, and that broadly makes
Yeah.
sense. I believe Texas also had a thing not too long ago in the grand scope of whiskey about being able to sell whiskey directly from the tasting rooms. And I think it was about pricing. It was something about protecting prices. So the price at the tasting rooms, I think the compromise they had was something along the lines of the price at the tasting rooms cannot be less than at liquor stores, despite the fact that you're not having the distributor involved. Because in order to protect the liquor stores, um, not to undercut the prices, basically. So there's a little bit of price control in the state of Texas that allows them to
Yeah.
sell directly, and it maybe even deliver. I think maybe the bigger deal was that distilleries are allowed to ship within the state, but I should check my facts on that. Um, anyway, that's just a
And
tangent.
Virginia distillers are permitted to ship within the Commonwealth of Virginia.
That is somewhat new, if I remember rightly.
Yes, it started during the pandemic, and has continued because via ABC realized that they couldn't put that cat back in the bag, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, all right. We are very close to 2 hours now. I think we should move on to our last
Yes.
distillery, Deep Creek Distilling Company.
And those are the founders of the company. In front of their still set up, it's Royal and Eamon. And I have their rye. Um, and this is a product that is sourced, but it is sort of interesting in that it isn't one of those, yeah, we bought barrels of whiskey and just bottled them directly. This is a blend of Kentucky and Texas ryes that have been
Ooh.
blended and finished in uh, oak barrels after blending. So basically, it's double barreled oak or twice barreled rye that is a blend of Texas and Kentucky ryes that they've selected and blended to profile and then uh, finished. Um,
Yeah, so when we were talking before about finishing versus secondary aging, I feel like this is an instance where you would be more likely to see the term secondary aging. Because instead of
yes.
taking 1-to-1 a barrel that was new oak and then put it into a barrel that was export or ex sherry or something like that, previously held something else, you're actually taking two barrels, blending them together, and putting them into one or more barrels of a certain spec for a secondary aging process. What's
Mhm.
interesting to note about that is in almost every country, uh, uh, let me not say that because I don't actually know. In Scotland, as long as you put the liquid into the barrels on the same day or something to that effect, you get to count that extra aging time in the secondary aging as part of the age statement. In the United States, as far as I know, that is not the case. You only get to take the age of the longer of the two maturations. So if the primary maturation is longer, that's the age statement. If the secondary maturation is longer, that's the age statement. And the labels will usually play tricks here where they have an age statement technically, but they actually also say how long it was in the secondary cask. So you can kind of do the math. It comes down to like what you can put on the front label and what you can say in terms of being transparent and factual.
In this case, the only age statement on there is that they took the whiskey from Kentucky and Texas at a minimum of 3 years of age. So there isn't a total age statement, and I would guess that if they had an age statement on it, that would be it. But these guys are cool. They were founded in 2018, the first legal distillery in Chesapeake City since Prohibition. They are sourcing while they're waiting for their distillate to mature. They're also selling the Ghost White Whiskey and a couple of other, like I believe a gin and a vodka. Um, they're really nice. They they do manage to produce an excellent and definitely unique. I haven't had anything like this rye whiskey from barrels sourced from other distilleries, which is in itself a feat. Um, I like their labeling. Living by the rye is green rule, of course.
Oh, let me make your camera bigger there so we can see the. Yep, rye is green, and also
Yeah.
that's a nice foil, the nice shiny foil on the label there.
Oh
Also,
They
yeah,
also
like
do
nice dark
make
color.
great dark color. They make sure to make the stuff that you want to know double oaked American rye whiskey and white instead of reflective. That's also really good.
Yep.
Love
yes,
that.
I'm gonna go to chat for a second. We have an
yes.
update from the pawn who tried to buy the three crosses. Not to give advertising to a specific third-party vendor. I won't read that part of the comment. But buying the three crosses did take him to a third-party online spirits store. Um, I will say, for the sake of the pawn, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, and for smaller producers, I would say that's more or less expected. Because setting up an online shop to sell spirits online is a legal minefield and also perhaps prohibitively expensive. So partnering with someone who already sells spirits is pretty much the way to go. I wouldn't worry about that too much. And another comment from the pawn. I don't know the context of the rare breed and old pepper, but that might have been when we were talking about ryes that were a little bit lower on the rye scale.
I
Um,
believe that was.
Yep. So those are some other examples there. Yeah, the Wild Turkey Rare Breed Rye will use the same mash bill as the Wild Turkey Rare Breed 101, for example, as well, just to tie that together. And a third comment from the pawn, in Ireland, it's the youngest liquid in the bottle. That is true almost everywhere that
That's
has
the best thing.
spirits laws. And that is a distinct point from the point that I was making about if you rebarrel something, whether you can add the extra aging time of the same liquid to the age statement or not, which is kind of a subtle point. It would be the same liquid, and say if you have a primary aging in one barrel for 3 years and a secondary aging in another barrel of that same liquid for 2 more years, is that a 5-year-old whiskey? And in the United States, I believe the answer to that is unequivocally no. And also on that point, Phill, that the fact that the label says 3 years anywhere on it, including the back label,
Mhm.
that actually is the age statement. Which is a fun, subtle point. Doesn't have to be on the front label to be an age statement. So now with all
It's
of
also
those tangents aside, sorry.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm being real nerdy
So
today. I apologize.
yeah.
It's all right.
Closing notes on the Virginia whiskey competition, Phil. And then I have a question I'd like to ask everybody to actually close out our podcast right here whenever we get to that.
And Pawn responded to that. Believe also in Ireland you can't add the age of the secondary cask. I believe that's true. But I would need to check the rules. I'm
Ooh.
more familiar with American and Scotch spirits laws and not the other countries per se.
I do need to do more research into that sort of thing. I used to have it pretty well memorized, but it's been a while since I've actually read it, and if you don't exercise those muscles, they atrophy.
Absolutely. And I remember when the two of us were trying to figure out the American spirits rules about the straight moniker, and it took
Yes.
us a shockingly long amount of time to realize that at some point between when we first started talking about American spirits laws and when we were trying to answer that question in the context of American single malt whiskey, the TTB had actually reformatted the standards of identity and changed all these paragraphs into a table. And so Phil and I were looking for a very specific paragraph in the old rules and couldn't find it anywhere on the internet,
Yes.
because our old, I believe it was a cornell.edu website that hosted the
Yeah.
standards of identity, had completely eliminated the old version, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Unfortunately, when something references section A, subsection B, or subsection 2,
mhm.
paragraph I, and you're looking at the chart going, okay, but where was that in the like written out rules?
Yeah, because not everybody can change. There's also like, you should be able to get an old version of the rules, but that was hard for us, aside from using the
Yeah.
Wayback Machine, which didn't occur to me for quite a long time. And then I figured out, oh yeah, they did change it. And I think there's so the odd thing that happened. Here's me tangenting nerdy again. Sorry. The odd thing that happened is they had a paragraph that described what straight meant when applied to any spirit, and they removed that paragraph and added it as specific line items to that table. So straight no longer has a generic definition, even though in practice it is applied the same to every single spirit. And I'm gonna leave it there. That's just an
Yep.
annoying, like, that. I've been professionally involved in standards text, so I get how these things go. It's always a lot of subtlety, and it will genuinely give you a headache writing or reading any of this stuff. So, and actually, funny enough, we have a member of the Whiskey Lodge, or maybe I'm not sure if he rejoined, a former member of the Whiskey Lodge, who left for personal reasons, but still a good friend of ours, who is involved in the same standards writing I used to be involved in, and is learning all this for the first time, which is real fun. So he gives me updates, and I go, "Yep, I know, I remember that." Um, anyway, sorry, way too many tangents today. What were we talking about besides? Oh, I wanted to ask you, Phil. What's your scoreboard?
Yes.
So, if I'm not mistaken, you had 6 of the 8 distilleries represented on your shelf.
Yes. That is correct. I'm missing Trial and Error and River Hill out of these two batches. Um, I'm working on acquiring as many of them as I can before they come up. Um, let me double check the poll real quick because I'm running it on YouTube and on Twitter, and Twitter is the one that's gotten the most traffic.
Yeah, do you want me to show a screenshot of the poll in progress? I actually have not voted yet. I was holding my vote until I could get this research stream out of the way,
Yeah, sure.
because I like to be informed, and I felt before doing this research or having this research read to me, I would just be guessing for a lot of these.
Yeah, no, I feel actually fairly confident on my votes now that I've heard all this.
And that's what we're aiming for. I hope that the audience
Yep.
feels similarly informed. And even y'all in the audience who are not big on spirits, and are tuning in because you like the background noise of our voices or whatever, please go vote. Hopefully we've told you enough tonight to that certain facts will stick out to you, and stay with you about these distilleries, such that you can make a choice between the 4. Because honestly, the more people come out in the first rounds, the more activity we're going to see in the later rounds, and that just makes it all the more interesting. So we'd love to have your votes.
Let me.
Oh, I'm gonna go back to the bracket slide here so that we can let's make that big now.
Yes.
So just to go over once again, read the brackets. Let's read the second bracket because we've done the first bracket again already. So in batch B of round 1, we have Trial and Error Distilling, J.H. Bards Spirit Company, Lost Whiskey, and Deep Creek Distilling. So those are the 4 we've gone over in our second hour today. So I won't say because I don't want to influence the results, but I do believe, it's a hard choice in a couple of cases, I do believe I have my votes in mind.
I believe that I also have my votes in mind, although it is very hard in many cases, I will say.
And Phill, if you want to send me screenshots, I'll put them on the slideshow and get them up on screen.
All right. Give me just a moment. Oh, I missed a word. Sorry, Pawn. I meant I welcome all votes.
Yes. Yes, Pawn. I I will make no qualms about admitting I haven't tasted any of these personally. I do trust Phil's palate. I think our palates largely jive. My personal preferences are a little bit different than his, but his tasting notes are usually right on. Um, and in this case, you know, I think with these craft distilleries and these small distribution stuff, you can't always taste everything to be able to judge. And since this is to some extent a popularity contest, even if you've had just one of these whiskeys and you're a fan, go ahead and vote for him. Because like really this is about getting the fans to come out of the woodwork and really just say like, as a proxy for popularity, how many fans do you have that are willing to vote on you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's
And
perfectly fine. And even to say you like what they're doing, right? You like where the materials are coming from, or you like their process, or that sort of thing, right? Perfectly reasonable to vote, regardless of your reason. It would be welcomed, and I think
Yeah,
it's meaningful and significant.
I'm going at this at a very, very different angle. I've had, oh gosh, I haven't had actually any of the ones that we talked about today, unfortunately. And while I trust Phil's tasting and things like that, some of the most interesting ones in this conversation were ones that he had not had to me, and I'm really, really enjoying those ones as a concept, and I really would love to try them someday.
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. I would say the same thing. I would put a slightly different spin on that. If there's something you see that you like here and you would like to see more of it, you'd like this distillery to do well, improve their distribution, get into more hands. One of the ways to do that is to spread the word, and one of the ways to spread the word is help them win this bracket. And also, retweet and talk about whatever. Do the things that you do on social media, tell people like, "Hey, there's this cool distillery in Virginia. Whether they win or not, they're worth looking at." And honestly, I feel like that's what this whole podcast is about, right? We're not saying who you should vote for. We're saying look at all of them, right? Consider, for your information, here is what you need to know. Would you like to add
And
anything
with
to that, Phill, or are we still waiting on the poll
yeah.
totals?
my audio just went wonky, so I will just real quick do a reset.
Sounds good.
Okay.
We can always cut it in post, which
Can
Yes.
always cut it in post.
when I know that I'm the one who has to climb the mountain of video editing, I'd rather we honestly, I'd rather we didn't because it is a lot of work.
Oh, fair enough then.
But the VODs are always going to go up on YouTube as they are, unless we said
I
something
have
particularly awful, and then we'll hold them back. But I'm pretty sure we're okay here.
I'm working on thinking out things that are particularly awful enough, but
Well,
it's hard.
then I just have to cut you out of the video.
I have
Where is the
dropped.
link again? Oh yes, we should have had that handy. I'm gonna say you should go ahead and go over to the Drinking Geeks at Twitter. that's going to be the easiest way to find these polls. So you can see on the screen there, you've got @DrinkingGeeks. That's where you're going to find these polls. That's just the easiest thing to do. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go find links for you, and in the middle of stream, that's not the best time. I'll also post it on the. I'll post it in the description of the video. I'll post it on Discord. You will not be wanting for a way to find these polls.
Beautiful. So, any other final comments on our Virginia Whiskey tournament right here? Are we ready to do some closing statements for the podcast and all?
I think that I am.
All
think I
right,
am
I
ready.
got I got a few questions lined up for you all for the next few weeks. First question though is just a really really simple one. If you had a whiskey and you wanted it to finish it in one kind of barrel, you just had it at home or something like that, what would have been in that barrel? Now, this can be more or less anything, even if it's not usually barreled. I just kind of want to hear what the first thing comes off y'all's mind is to finish it up in barrels with.
You know that the way you phrased that question makes me think of I don't sadly I don't remember who this was that I heard say. But thinking of blending as making a cocktail, and by blending I mean putting barrels together to get a to achieve a flavor profile from the flavor profiles available to you, different proportions and so on. And I think a lot of people think that like finishing whiskey is really just a fancy way of adding a little bit of something else to your whiskey, and there may be something to that, but the barrels do still have an impact. I will say from my own experience of using this 2-liter barrel here, which I keep referring to but haven't actually held up. So let me just go grab it real quick. Try not to drop it on the floor. Yeah. So here is my 2-liter barrel, which is about the size of my head.
There we
Coincidentally,
go.
so what I have in here is rum. And I have used this barrel 8 times so far. And I can still taste things that were in this barrel 3 or 4 times ago coming through in what I have aging in this barrel now. I can still taste the barrel itself. The barrels have a kind of personality, if you will, or at least barrels plus the aging environment, which in this case is my room here. I don't keep this perfectly air conditioned all the time, so the temperature does fluctuate in here by about 10 degrees. So it's not a perfectly stable environment. There's a personality to how I'm aging. I still taste that personality, right? So there's more than just adding, like port finishing something. There's more than just adding a little bit of port to it. You can simulate that. If you want to know how your finish is going to come out, you could say, well, okay, I've got this thing I'm thinking about putting in the barrel, and I've got what came out of the barrel. Let me add just a touch of what came out of the barrel to this thing I'm going to put in the barrel and see if that works. I actually abandoned a plan for the barrel because when I blended I don't remember what it was now, but when I blended a little bit of what was in the barrel before to what I was planning on putting in the barrel, it went completely flat. I think it was rye and tequila. Did not work.
Ah,
Um, all that said, I'm actually really jamming on rum finishes right now. Um, I am once this rum comes out of this barrel, I'm gonna put whiskey in this barrel for sure. I'm gonna make myself a rum finished whiskey.
I
All right.
love you so much, Demi. You are such a fucking nerd. It's crazy. It's so wild, dude.
Just get me started talking. I'll go forever.
Phill, what were you looking at?
So I've got this Distillers Edition Catoctin Creek. Not very much of it because I go through this stuff pretty quickly because it's one of my go-tos. And I think that it'd be really cool to finish it in a heavily peated whiskey barrel, like like this. This is the Catoctin Creek Barrel Select finished in a Lafroig barrel, and it is fantastic and weird and different, and I love it. But wouldn't it be cool to take some Catoctin Creek and put it into a barrel that held a different peated single malt whiskey?
Here we go again.
Yeah.
Would that different peated single malt whiskey happen to be an Gary Oak by any chance?
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, there we go. No, I've been looking at getting a barrel myself, and the first thing I really want to try with it is popping some ouzo in it. Seeing
Ooh.
what the oak does to that, but then seeing what that does to whiskey in turn. Because I'm always a huge fan of those licorice aspects that you get very occasional in whiskey, and I would like there to be more of that out there, honestly. So I might have to make it myself.
Yeah. Would you put a bourbon in there?
No, probably a single malt or a rye if I had to choose that one. Yeah.
Okay. I can imagine those, and I feel they would be very different, but both
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I'll say the aquavit that I have, not the same thing as ouzo, but also a little bit forward on that licorice anise kind of direction. Um, is barrel aged. The one that I used in that cocktail some weeks back. It
Mm-hmm.
is barrel aged, and it is quite good. I think that the oakiness really accented the woody spices of the sort of fennel and licorice anise. So I imagine that aging an ouzo in an ex bourbon cask would be a real interesting thing. And then further, my personal preference on that, I think, would be to put a single malt in there, probably a Speyside. Something a little bit more delicate, but not necessarily like a sherried Speyside though. But like something that's like a little bit more of a, let's say, a smooth flavor profile, where it's sort of uncomplicated but still distinct. Because adding that flavor note, adding that spiciness, I think would play really nicely there.
Gonna be with you. I'm probably gonna pop the Delbach Classic into it when I do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't
Nice.
quite align with the Speyside, but I think there may be some similarities there. I think that could work. I confess my only Del Bach experience so
The
far
Space Smoke one, probably.
is the Lost Lanterns back there. Um,
Yeah.
so I haven't had your own Del Bach yet. Um, yeah, would be good to try. But yeah,
We'll
I like
figure that out
that.
someday or other.
I'm on board with your Uzo finish idea. I've never seen that before. I like things I've never seen before.
Yeah, I think it's just because nobody puts ouzo into a barrel. It's just not one of those things that's like available commercially at all, and probably just kind of won't be. Similar thing to, something like an absinthe finish, which I'm also somewhat into just because I would like some wood finished absinthe. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah. Also kind of that's kind of in the same vein, I think. Let me just
Yeah.
clarify. So I see your screenshots there, Phill. Do you want me to put those up, or do you feel like it's too soon to really tell?
I mean, maybe if people know that there are ties, there'll be some interest in putting some thumbs on scales. I frequently last year said, "Oh, we've got a tie."
Yeah. Without revealing the
Yeah,
actual
but
information.
both of them are tied up. I put a link to one of them in the Twitch chat, which will help find the second one as well. Um,
Yep.
and the pawn says that they have the Appleton Estate 12 in their barrel, and that sounds like an interesting seasoning, maybe.
Yeah, sometimes when I put stuff in my barrel, I'm thinking primarily of what I'm going to put in after. Like I'm like, I don't care how this turns out, it's probably going to be fine. I'm really interested in what happens when I finish something else in what I just put in the barrel. But, Appleton Estate with a little more oak could be interesting. Is if it goes too far, it'll probably overwhelm the rum. It's not that strongly of a flavored rum, I think.
Now, I would like to get my hands on one of the Copper Fox barrel kits because they sell a little 2-liter barrel and 2 liters of bourbon new make, and I'm thinking uh, into the barrel at 114, 115 proof, out of the barrel, and then make some mead in the barrel,
Oh,
and then throw something into the barrel for finishing.
okay. That's cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was their I thought it was their Wassman's single malt, unaged single malt, or something like that.
They used to sell new make for their malt, their bourbon, and their rye spirits,
Mm.
but currently they only have their bourbon new make or bourbon mash new make available on their website.
Oh, here's an actual thing. I'm sorry to immediately um, uh, do this to you, but I just popped onto their barrel kit. It looks like you'll get a two of one of their unaged spirits, either a single malt spirit, a rye spirit, or a bourbon mash, which is very
Ooh.
exciting.
Ooh, so they've updated the website. Cool.
Yeah,
I
this looks
meant
very
to
new.
I meant to ask Rick about that while I was talking to him on Saturday, and I didn't because I got distracted talking to him about finishing rye and also him reminding me that I need to get his business card to you, Demi,
Aha.
because he remembered that I had a friend who was writing a book on American single malt.
Yeah, so well, I was going to ask questions, but that might be a good topic to close out on. Um, so, as a friend said to me, quite eloquently, I think, something along, and I'm not going to do justice to it, something along the lines of, which is embarrassing for someone who's trying to write a book, let's say, um, but trying to quote other people is hard. Um, to paraphrase, having a podcast where we explore topics gives you a reason to develop your ideas. Uh, that is a very eloquent way of putting the reason that I wanted to start putting out video content topical to whiskey, American single malt, put out written content in short form. I've done a whole lot of talking about the stuff that I've learned on Discord, which is a nice private clubhouse in a sense of where to learn things and where to share things, and everybody learns from each other. But I would like to have a broader audience. I'd like to share this stuff with more people, especially about American single malt. And so yeah, there is a goal, long-term goal, to write a book on American single malt. The exact form of this book I have not quite decided, but I had a rough outline I was sharing around with people I asked for interviews that was around um, essentially basically half the book is going to be topical, like aspects that go into making American single malt whiskey, which apply uh, maybe more or less broadly to other types of whiskey as well. And the other half of the book, or however much percentage it ends up being, I want to be the stories the distilleries want to tell about themselves, uh, more or less, and filtered through these topics and my own point of view and so on. But to get their take on the industry and how they're producing stuff and like what they would like to share. And then partner that up with pair that up with my own reviews of their spirits, as many as I can, without overwhelming the book with reviews, right? But just sort of do the short. Um, I do extremely like I do long reviews. That's kind of my style. I have to force myself to be short sometimes. A lot of the length, though, is the research that I've done about the distilleries, which would lend itself nicely to putting into this book format. Um, the reviews themselves I could shorten quite significantly if I had another place to put that research. And so I think the book will be a good place to have a balance between the distillery research and the tasting notes. Um, so yeah, I am trying to write a book, and in order to write the book, developing the ideas along the way and releasing them in some form will slow down the production of the book, but in theory, it will build an audience for the book at the same time and also show that I'm making progress, which makes people have a reason to talk to me. Because if you don't see that I'm doing anything, why bother? You could just be wasting hours of your life talking to some person who just felt like talking to you for no good reason. Uh, thank you, Genji. Uh, I appreciate the luck. I don't know whether to say I feel like I need it. Um, but I might as well, right?
Always take the luck, my guy. Come on now.
I will
Yep.
I will always take the luck. Reasons are irrelevant. Um So yeah, this podcast is meant to be a step along the way to writing a book, and so anyone who wants to reach out that's in American single malt, or really any kind of whiskey, because I am not strictly limited to American single malt, though that is the focus of the book. And likewise, I will be reaching out, especially if somebody gives me contacts, and especially if somebody has talked to somebody. I appreciate that kind of lead from anyone in my audience, anybody who knows me. If you meet a distiller who is interested in doing an interview about American single malt, ask them if you can send their information my way. I would very much appreciate it. So, I feel like something like this takes a village. And like I said earlier, everyone who's working with me on this podcast and in any other way is getting paid in good vibes. So there's no money till there's money, and any help from the community is really going to go a long way. So I appreciate that. Not a soapbox I intended to do today, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk about it. I'm sure I'll talk about it again. Hopefully not too often, because I think the work should speak for itself. I think this podcast is a product in and of itself. It's something we enjoy doing. Um, it's hopefully worthy of your time, or at least some of it. I would like to edit these down to be a little bit shorter to respect people's valuable time. Um,
I respect none of their times.
well, there you go. That's why you're not the editor.
All right. I think with that, it might be about time to say goodbye to everyone, though. Demony, any final closing remarks on there or anything like that?
Well, I'd like to cheers the Virginia Whiskey Tournament, and I'm not sure how to do that other than to say, cheers to the Virginia Whiskey Tournament. May we have
And
great turnout and spread the word about these great Virginia distilleries.
here's to the continuation of craft distilling in Virginia and the amazing work that they do.
Cheers.
Cheers.